It's an unprecedented crisis within India's top investigative agency, the CBI. The CBI Director Alok Verma has moved the Supreme Court challenging a government order that sent him on leave, an order delivered to him in the dead of the night. Meanwhile, the CBI Special Director Rakesh Asthana is also on leave after a CBI FIR charged him with corruption. Now, while many are watching from the sidelines and interpreting these events in different ways, BJP MP Subramanian Swamy has been vocal about his support for CBI Director Alok Verma. We're now joined by Mr. Swamy to understand why he is backing an officer that his government has effectively shunted out. Thank you for speaking with us on Bloomberg, Quint. Mr. Swamy, just the basic question and, the tweet that you put out yesterday, where you said that you would effectively stop all the corruption cases or the anti-corruption cases that you've taken to court if you got a feeling that your government wasn't backing you. Where is all of this coming from?
Well, you see, since we came to power, and I had already by then a reputation for taking corruption cases to courts and getting a result, the 2G being a example of that, the 2G spectrum case. Then thereafter I had filed on 2013 another case which was that of against Mr. Chidambaram for the Aircel Maxis scam. And soon as we thereafter, I think before we came to power, I had also filed a private complaint in the Patiala House Court on the National Herald case. So with that kind of reputation, there was a lot of expectation that I will see that a government with a majority would be able to remove all the obstacles that I might face the more partisan government. But I found the opposite happening. I found that the finance ministry was dragging his feet, as well as in fact giving public statements that how the crime was so trivial and it could be got away by paying a small fine, etc. And then came along Mr. Tharoor's case, which is where it was quite clear that, and the autopsy report said that that Sunanda Pushkar had died an unnatural death. And there also a refusal to register an FIR. So this was sort of piling up that somehow our government, though better than the Congress, was in fact not very keen to bring all these things to a finality and a closure. And all kinds of arguments were being given to me that if Chidambaram is charge sheeted, Congress will not allow Parliament to function, etc., etc. In this background, I found that officers who are honest were being targeted. Not only they were targeted in the UPA period, but they were being targeted by our government. For example, the case of presently the Joint Director of ED, Mr. Dr. Rajeshwar Singh, whose promotion has been held up for 1 year by the Finance Secretary, Mr. Adya. He was targeted by Mr. Chidambaram. He removed him from service while he was investigating the Aircel Maxis case. I went to the Supreme Court set it aside and gave a direction. And surprisingly, after our government came, Mr. Jaitley took him to the High Court and tried to get him removed. And for that also I had to go against my own government and get it. So I'm saying a background was created that somehow we are not serious about corruption. And that's when I found that a man as honest as Mr. Verma, I knew him when he was a Delhi Police Commissioner, and I've seen him how he worked, how he reduced corruption in Delhi Police and prosecuted officers who were of misdemeanor. He was given a promotion on merit as CBI Director, and then they started targeting him. And suddenly they brought in, totally illegally, Mr. Asthana from Gujarat and placed him as Special Director. And then they all began to work to see that Mr. Verma leaves and Asthana takes over. But Verma turned out to be a tough guy, and that's how this whole clash has come. And that's why I'm supporting Mr. Verma.
All right. Now, you say that what you had hoped to see from this government in terms of anti-corruption has not happened. It's a very significant comment, because one of the planks that this government came to power on, and which was fought on before the last elections, was anti-corruption. Why do you think this government has not managed to fulfill those promises? And how is that being seen in the case of Alok Verma? Because remember, he has been accused of corruption as well.
Yes. That's a joke. I mean, I don't think even you can charge him with corruption of a packet of salt or something like that. That's all manufactured, and it in fact was started by Mr. Asthana so that he will resign and go, so that Asthana can take over as director. To say that the director targeted, then investigation showed that Mr. Asthana was complicit with Mr. Chidambaram. Chidambaram had a lady journalist who was friendly to him. She used to come and see him. And then there were undesirable characters who had been declared by the CBI itself as undesirable characters who should not be allowed in the corridors of power. They began meeting him. Then they began filing PILs in the court, which I had to go and fight and get it quashed. And now, of course, those racketeers are in jail, in Tihar jail, for a whole lot of crimes. So all this was happening to pressurize Mr. Verma to just in disgust resign and go. And there is no charge against Mr. Verma of any validity. The CVC himself is a dubious character, in my opinion. Should never have been appointed. But he played safe for all this time, and suddenly he's erupted with all kinds of statements.
But, you know, Mr. Asthana, and it has been widely reported, and you said he's from the Gujarat cadre, he's believed to, have worked with Prime Minister Modi earlier, been close to the PMO. So why would he go slow on corruption cases against political opponents of this government? I mean, I don't see the logic. Both Asthana and Verma have been selected by this government.
Yes, of course. And I was happy when they selected Verma, and I celebrated it. But Mr. Asthana, actually in Gujarat, Mr. Modi went for the big picture. And at the lower levels of following the Gujarat riots and dealing with Dawood's people, etc., the officers had a complete free hand. Modi was known for the fact that he gave free hand to the officers. I didn't think that he thought that anyone could be bought. And it's only happened. I must tell you one thing which nobody knows, but I was told about 6 months ago that Mr. Asthana will go. And I thought, well, for 6 months we can bear him. But then this coup d'etat took place where he foisted a case against Mr. Asthana, and the CVC piously sitting there and pontificating instead of throwing that thing out in the waste paper basket. So this is what created the crisis. So Modi, I personally have very high regard, because whenever I wrote a letter showing that this block is coming or this block coming, he would call the officers and ask for an explanation. If he was satisfied I was right, he would remove that block. And so I don't think that Modi has anything to do with it, except that he's been too much interested in the big picture, his pet ideas on Make in India, where he has achieved a considerable amount of success, traveling abroad frequently. So therefore, what these people were doing, I don't think came to his attention. And since the Gang of Four I've identified, made sure that no information reached to him except through my letters.
You know, you've spoken on this Gang of Four often, which is why I want to ask you about it. You've spoken about it. It's now in the public domain. Are you really expecting people to believe that Prime Minister Modi, who is known to have a great grip over his administration, doesn't know what is happening or is not in a position to stop people from scuttling what he wants to do? It paints a very different picture from what the party has been saying so far on his style of administration. There's a dichotomy there, wouldn't you agree, sir?
There's no dichotomy. Gujarat was just limited to Gujarat. Here he's got multi-dimensional responsibilities. I think the number of banquets he attends for visiting, states or heads of states and so on is itself enough to take at least 30-40% of his time. And I think Prime Minister's all that. The question is, Mr. Modi, did he delegate his authority to those people who are honest and had them probed from time to time to see whether they have become rogue or not? I think that he didn't do. And I must say, listen, whenever I've brought to his notice that somebody has turned rogue, he got rid of him despite the country on one side on it. For instance, Raghuram Rajan. Even Mr. Obama called up to say that his appointment term should be extended. But Modi didn't care. He thought that he was inappropriate and sent him away. And there were other appointments. Shaktikant Das, who was removed from the Ministry of Finance. So many. Kumar Bhatt, who was sent back to Bihar cadre. So whenever the matter was brought to the Prime Minister, he acted after verifying the facts. But I was the only one bringing it up, and I felt I can't go on writing him a letter every day. But this one was too much because it was a coup d'etat. There was an attempted coup d'etat by the Gang of Four, and it failed.
I just want to bring to your notice, and of course you know already, some of the things that Mr. Verma has said in his petition. And they're very significant sentences. For example, he says there are bound to be occasions when certain investigations into high functionaries do not take the direction that may be desirable to the government. He then talks about the present action gives serious credence to the requirement that the CBI be given independence from the DOPT. But I think the most important is, he says the details of many of the cases which have led to the present circumstances are extremely sensitive, and he offers to present them before the court. In your view, what are these cases? And I'm asking you because the opposition now says that one of these cases is the complaint on the Rafale deal that is sitting on his table currently.
Well, first of all, let me dispose of this Rafale matter. That's just a complaint from the Congress. There's no substance in it. I don't think he was planning to go any further on it. Which was the CVC who was encouraging the Congress people that yes, the CBI is bound to investigate it. And on that advice, they came. It was an unofficial advice, but he gave it. As far as the sensitive files are concerned, that's come in the Indian Express today. It's been, I think, taken from the court records or whatever, but it's all there, including my complaint against Mr. Adya, where I've sought the sanction to prosecute him. This whole Choksi and Nirav Modi and all that, he's been complicit in every corruption. Vodafone, the Vodafone scandal, he has been complicit. So those are sensitive files because that man was principal advisor to Narendra Modi when he was in Gujarat, and he's now become finance secretary. And so it is lying on his table, and the Indian Express report said that lying on the table was this. So what is a CBI director supposed to do? Supposing I give a complaint and he doesn't act on it, I can go to court and ask the court to give him a direction. That's what happened in 2G. When I complained that Manmohan Singh didn't take it seriously, I went to the court, and the court then took up the whole matter, and you know what happened. So I think the directors of CBI have to be careful that if some members of parliament come and give them a complaint, they must have it looked at least.
And now tomorrow the case comes up for hearing the Supreme Court, which is Alok Verma's challenge to the government's order to send him on leave. If the verdict goes in his favor and he is reinstated, wouldn't it be a huge embarrassment for your government, leading them to answer a lot of questions? I mean, today you have reports of IB officers trying to, snoop around his house. The situation is becoming quite strange.
Well, the people who are going to lose, I know they are, but Modi doesn't stand to lose because he had delegated responsibility to the National Security Advisor and the Finance Minister. They are the ones who drew up this blueprint. And in the party, none of us will take it amiss if tomorrow a stay order is given on the order issued to go ask Mr. Verma to go on leave. I don't think there'll be finality tomorrow. They will probably have an extended hearing, including which are the files which he calls as sensitive. But tomorrow, the thing that the court could decide is give a stay on the order and ask him to resume his duties, which I hope they do, because he is the only one who's clued in. And all these previous cases, the new guy who's come is a complete novice as far as the central CBI is concerned. And therefore, it will all go beyond the elections, and we will not be able to show our face in the election. So I hope Mr. Verma is reinstated tomorrow in terms of a stay order. I am sure that the Prime Minister should not and will not take it personal to him, because he had delegated responsibility and they made a mess of it.
You know, once again, I have to ask you this question, Mr. Swamy. This time and again, you try and talk about the separation between the actions and the intention of the Prime Minister and the people who really are closest to him, work very closely with him. It seems that everything that is wrong is the fault of those who work with him, and he is away from all of this. Really, beyond the point, would the guy at the top not have to take responsibility of what is happening on his watch? Just, you know, very simply and logically.
I've never mentioned Mr. Nripendra Mishra. He's the principal secretary to the Prime Minister. Have I ever said anywhere? In fact, in person, at the informal level, not wanting to embarrass him, I say in the informal level, very good things about him. I knew him when he was a telecom in charge, that is whatever that is called, controller, whatever. He, in the 2G time, I have seen his correspondence and so on. So there are many people. I can give you bureaucrats like Rajeshwar. He's a top. I mean, I've never seen a detective like him. The guy has got a memory which I have not seen in many people. And so there are a large number of officers I praise. There was one young officer called Arjun Raghavendra, who is the most brilliant officer. And what Mr. Hashmukh Adia did to him is unbelievable. I'll one day document it somewhere in if I write my autobiography. But it says horrible, this man is a sadist. So there are magnificent officers, but they have to be given confidence that if they go through in the interest of the country, they will be protected. They don't have to say yes sir, no sir.
You know, I have one last question for you, sir, which is what some of your critics may say.
Yes.
That you are, of course, a member of parliament from the BJP.
Yes.
You have supported this government throughout. But there are times when you criticize. They could be because you've always had independent thought. But some may say it's also because of a bit of unhappiness with not being given a role as big as you may have desired, either as a minister or as some kind of an independent charge, a prominent role within this government. And because you haven't been given such a role, there is this unhappiness which is being expressed publicly time and again.
Well, see, in India, finding motives for enlightened actions and behavior is a very cheap way that we function. I think it's basically, you can't think of any argument against me, so you ascribe a motive. Well, I was not made finance minister. The loser is the government, not me. I've been going around the country campaigning for the party. Right now I am in the IIT Delhi. In the morning I was in Ahmedabad. I think if you ask me, I emerged as the second most popular person in the party. And all this because I stayed out. Many people think that you are lucky. They keep telling me you're lucky he wasn't a minister. Today you would be holding the bag. On the contrary, you have done tremendous amount of work. You have created a huge following in the Twitter. All this is because you were denied being a finance minister. If I'm not a finance minister, I'm not the loser. The loser is the government of India.
Okay, I promised you it was the last question, but now really last question. In the current situation, few months away from the next general election, would you agree that the BJP is looking at its weakest as it has in the last 4 years? Even a year ago, people would have not thought that it would be such a big fight as it is looking right now.
I don't agree. People are thinking that Mr. Vajpayee was so strong that he advanced the elections by 6 months and got a beating of his life. The party strength went to half. You must know that we are a highly heterogeneous in terms of opinions, a democratic society. I would say that the Hindutva appeal, and if we are able to reconstruct this anti-corruption appeal, I think that's enough for us to win. The economy is in a mess, I agree, but that's not going to be a deciding factor.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Subramanian Swamy, and for answering all of our questions frankly.